There it is. We're 15 seconds in. Today's broadcast. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me for a few moments today. You know, this morning I had the privilege of covering the Patriotic Front's manifesto launch event over there at Mulungushi Conference Center. Hello, Matilda. Matilda, I think you were the first one yesterday, and it seems to me that you're the first one again today. Welcome. Welcome to you, Matilda, and thank you so much for being with us for a few minutes. Michelle Klein Bliss Johnson. Hi, Uncle. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. Hey, Shazzy. Is it Shazzy? Shazia. Hello to you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Doc Mumba Shadrach, watching you live from Cape Town. You know, I've been to Cape Town, and I think I can safely say when I first went to Cape Town, it was probably one of the most beautiful places that we had ever been. You know, it was just so, it was beautiful. It was lovely. We had a wonderful time there many years ago, about 5-6 years ago. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for jumping on. Thank you for being with me for a few minutes. I was saying that earlier today, I have to lean into the light here. Earlier today, first of all, can you hear me? Please tell me in the comments. This is something that I often have difficulties with. Sometimes I'll jump on here, not realizing that I am mute or mute. You know, there are two ways of saying that word. Some people say mute, others say mute, you know, no sound. Please tell me if you can hear me. Yes, I can hear you, says Chilo Joyce. Gelo, not Chilo. Gelo. That is Gelo, isn't it? Wonderful. Linda Mwanza, thank you so much. Bless you. Great. I had the privilege today. This morning, I was invited to cover the Patriotic Front's manifesto launch, and I ran into so many notable people. But one of the people that I ran into, that I was hoping that I would run into, and I did, was Iris. Iris was there. And as I told you in my address yesterday, when I first met Iris a few years ago over there at Pizza Hut, she was sitting at a table outside, and she had this little husky dog. You know, these Alaskan dogs. I think they're called huskies. And she was sitting out there. This was several years ago, and I walked over to her, and I said hello, and I asked if I could take a photograph with her. Very amiable, very engaging, and I must say she was very engaging again today. Very polite, you know. But one of the things that I asked her, and I found this curious, I asked her if she could speak Lozi, because one of the concerns that I had yesterday when I was speaking about Iris was that I didn't know that she could speak Lozi and communicate with the average person in Mwandi district, in the rural areas there in the Western province. My concern was, you know, you had this social media socialite that would not be able to communicate in the local language. Well, she told me today, when I asked her, I said, "Can you speak Lozi?" So she started speaking in Lozi, you know. And of course, I don't know how to speak Lozi. The only thing I know is Womkwai. In fact, when the vice president waltzed in, not walked, but when she waltzed into the hall, I sort of unceremoniously yelled out, Womkwai, which I understand in Lozi, Womkwai means princess or royalty. Please tell me in the comments below. somebody will always correct me if I get it wrong in the comments below. They'll say, no, Mwewa, that's not the word. You have mixed it up. So if I'm wrong, please tell me in the comments below. But in any case, I did meet Iris and I asked her if she spoke Lozi. The one thing though that I did ask her was that I asked her, I said, can you speak it fluently? And she said, well, not fluently, but I can communicate. And I suppose that's good enough, and so we ended the conversation there. And I walked away with the sense that, she really wants to serve and she's put her foot forward, and we'll see what comes of it. And we wish her the very best. Her and the other 5 women that have been nominated in the Western Province on the Patriotic Front's ticket. We wish them all the best, and go out there and shake a leg. You see there, Philemon Dopey says, you are wrong, dear. I see there. You can never win on social media. You can never win. Womukwai. Doesn't Womukwai mean princess or royalty? Isn't that what that means? So then somebody hears. Sometimes I think people say things just to be controversial. Anyway. So guys, just a few minutes today. I wanted to talk to you about something that, the other night I was watching a replay of the verdict in the George Floyd case, which, honestly speaking, anytime you have a case, a murder case of this magnitude and at this level, you realize very quickly that it gets reactions from all different walks of life. And this case, ironically, in my view, is the first high-profile case that was tried during the Black Lives Matter era. For those of you that are familiar with Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement was birthed out of a sense of frustration at the way law enforcement was exponentially killing Black people more than they would kill other races. And so this movement called the Black Lives Matter was birthed, and rightly so. And of course, there you have different views from both sides of the spectrum. There are people that don't support Black Lives Matter, people that think that it's a racist, one-sided, bigoted organization leaning towards the leaning towards Black people. And then you've got the other side that thinks that, it's fine and the Black Lives Matter has a place in history. Now, what I find interesting about this case, and I've shared with you my story, my experience. Somebody once said that you can never argue with a person with an experience. My experience in America with law enforcement, and of course, everybody has a different experience. I'm not saying that my experience is the barometer, that my experience is the measuring stick. Absolutely not. I'm just saying that this is my experience, that this was my experience. What I discovered while living there, and I lived there for close to 7 years, and what spoke to me quite clearly was I got the sense that there was a pushback against the police. And I always thought that dealing with American police officers was easy as long as you do what they say. I went in there with that thought. I really did. I only had 2 experiences, and both experiences, fortunately, both experiences turned out okay. But looking back in retrospect, my experiences could have easily gone south, easily gone wrong. Had I reacted in the wrong way, had I done the wrong thing, we would have been talking about something else. But because I always have this in mind, that respect the police officer, do what the officer asks you to do. If the officer says, step out of the car, don't argue with the officer. Just do what he says. If he says, put your hands behind your back, do it. When you resist, you increase your chances of not coming out of that situation alive. So here it is. You had George Floyd, and let's recap. George Floyd had walked into a store. This is in the city of Minneapolis. This is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minneapolis is the city. Minnesota is the state. Minneapolis, and he walked into a store and he attempted to buy a packet of cigarettes with a counterfeit note. Now, already there, that is a crime. You cannot attempt to purchase anything with a counterfeit note. And so the shop attendant who received this fake $20 note, was a counterfeit note, he did what any law-abiding storekeeper would do. He called the police. The police responded. They showed up. They confronted George Floyd. George Floyd resisted. Therein lies the conundrum. Therein lies the juxtaposition. Had George Floyd not resisted, we wouldn't be talking about what we're talking about today. We wouldn't be talking about Derek Chauvin. We wouldn't be doing that. The officer that was arrested and subsequently charged with the murder of George Floyd. And I've always maintained this. Of course, there are people that disagree with that, but the videotape is self-evident. George Floyd did resist arrest. Now, here's the thing, guys. When you resist an officer in that environment, resisting an officer in Zambia is slightly different, I think. You can sort of negotiate your way, in a sense. But in America, especially as a person of color, a black person, when you resist the police, when you push back, when you refuse to be taken in, the problem with American police officers is when you put them in a position where they are forced and compelled to subdue you, they will do everything within their power to subdue you. Their objective is to get you in custody. Their objective is never to see you walk away. If they suspect you of a crime, they're not going to let you go. An American police officer will die trying to apprehend you if he suspects that you're a criminal. They never let it go. Why? Because they're trained that way. They are completely psyched in that way to subdue you when you resist arrest. So here's the key. The key, first of all, is don't resist arrest. In the case of George Floyd, he resisted. And you know, later on he claimed that, and the footage is there, the videotape is there. He said that he was claustrophobic. You know the word claustrophobic. There are people that they feel they don't like small spaces. You know, there are people that walk onto an elevator because the elevator is a little small boxed space. There are people that cannot handle that. They're claustrophobic. They feel they begin to feel suffocated, and they just want to remove themselves from that confined small space. George Floyd, while being arrested, was telling the officer, "I'm claustrophobic." Now, here's the thing, guys. The officer doesn't care about that. A police officer doesn't care whether or not you're claustrophobic. What is first and foremost on his mind is to subdue you, contain you, and confine you. Because he doesn't know who you are. He doesn't. He's not there saying, well, I'm sure you're a good guy. No, the officer doesn't know anything about you. You could be a serial killer, or you could be Santa Claus. He doesn't know. And the only way he can ascertain that, the only way he can come to that conclusion is if he subdues you, takes you downtown, processes you, and knows exactly who you are. But the moment of apprehension, the moment where he's attempting to apprehend you and you resist, the only thing that matters to the police officer is to subdue you. So here it is. Unfortunately, George Floyd he resisted. And so Derek Chauvin, I say Chauvin, I don't know how you pronounce it. Some people say Shaven. I say Derek Chauvin, the 45-year-old Minneapolis police officer who was charged with the murder of George Floyd, in an effort to subdue George Floyd, handcuffed George Floyd, and then placed his knee on George Floyd's neck. It was at that point that George Floyd kept on saying, "I can't breathe." For more than 9 minutes, Officer Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck in an effort to subdue him, not in an effort to kill him. Okay? Now, of course, this is where it gets hazy. This is where it gets grainy. When you look at the footage, for me, the officer was not trying to kill him. He was trying to subdue him. But in the process of attempting to subdue him, unfortunately, George Floyd died. So, of course, the officer was fired after this incident and then subsequently arrested and charged. 3 charges. Officer Derek Chauvin was given 3 charges. Okay? The first charge, second-degree unintentional murder. He was found guilty on this charge. He didn't intend to kill George Floyd, but George Floyd died as a direct consequence of the tactic that Officer Chauvin used on George Floyd. So guilty on second degree, the first charge, second degree unintentional murder, guilty. The second charge, second degree murder, Officer Chauvin acted with a depraved mind. Now, it's important to understand or to define, what does depraved mean? In simple terms, it means that according to the law, Officer Chauvin had evil intent against George Floyd, which I disagree with. I don't think that the officer had evil intent. In my view, Officer Derek Chauvin was simply trying to subdue George Floyd. But because George Floyd resisted arrest, Officer Chauvin placed his knee, handcuffed him, placed his knee on George Floyd's neck, thereby sort of preventing an airway to George Floyd's respiratory system. And George Floyd, as a direct consequence of that, died. But the law saw it fit to find the jury, after deliberating for 10 hours over a period of 2 days, they found Officer Derek Chauvin guilty, the second charge, which is second-degree murder, that Officer Chauvin he acted with a depraved mind, that he had evil intent towards George Floyd. I disagree with that. The third charge, manslaughter. And the manslaughter charge said that Chauvin's culpable negligence caused Floyd's death. Now, what does culpable mean? In other words, Officer Chauvin knew better, but he chose not to do better, according to the law. This is when they define culpable negligence, it's defined as you knew to do the right thing, but you chose not to do the right thing. And again, on the third charge, Officer Officer Siobhan was found guilty. Guilty on all 3 charges. Now, I have to tell you, these cases in America are highly political. I mean, when you have the eyes of the world that are focused on a racially charged case, very controversial. And my experience has been that whenever you have a case of this magnitude, of course, in any case, there are no winners. There are no winners in this case. Nobody won here. You know, George Floyd's family have lost a loved one. Officer Siobhan's family have lost a loved one. Tell me what you think. What are your views on this case? Oh dear, they're gonna come after me. Here it is. Vicky says, I disagree with you on this one. Even his fellow officer was also begging him to get his knee off of him. He knew George couldn't breathe. He was crying for help. Come on. Well, I agree with that part, yes. But you know, I tell you, I always say this. You know, the the American police officer is very different from the Zambian police officer. I've always said that an American police officer, every day an American police officer wakes up in the morning, he is potentially walking into a very deadly situation. On any given day, the officer can die. I mean, at the drop of a hat, you can walk out of your house and say, bye, honey, I'll see you later. And that afternoon, that officer could be shot right between the eyes. So an American police officer potentially walks into a deadly situation every single day they serve. Very different from a Zambian police officer. When a Zambian police officer wakes up, he walks into a potentially lucrative situation every day. I know I sound facetious, but you get the point. You get the point. Elias Tembo says, your analysis is off tangent. Well, that's your view. Okay, here's one. Here's one. Buku says, subdue when he is handcuffed. The moment someone is handcuffed, he or she is under control. His plan was to kill a black man. No, you see, this, I don't agree with that. I don't. I don't agree with that at all. The man was on duty. He responded to a call that this young man was trying to pass off a counterfeit $20 note as a real note. And the cashier, the shop attendant, called the police. The police responded. They confronted George Floyd. They didn't confront George Floyd with the intent of killing a black man. I disagree with that. I disagree with that totally. Lewanika says he used excessive force. Charge is very well deserved. Your opinion? Tembo says, whichever way, got to read this, whichever way you look at this, there was no need of that level of force used on Mr. Floyd. I hear you. And you know what's interesting is, and again, you know, there was and you get hundreds of these. There was a case where a white man had been apprehended for he was suspected of committing some crime. The white man was sitting, he'd been arrested, subdued, handcuffed, and he was sitting on the ground while the officers were waiting for backup or something. And one of the officers took a bottle of water and gave it to this guy who he sort of gave him the water to drink. And the contrast between those two scenarios was very, very telling. So what I'm saying to you, I got to read this. So, Mr. Samuel, according to you, the officer is not guilty? No, I didn't say he's not guilty. What I'm saying is that I don't think that the charge, he shouldn't have been charged with, he shouldn't have been found guilty on this charge here, second-degree murder, where it was defined that Chauvin acted with a depraved mind. A depraved mind meaning he had ill or evil intent towards George Floyd. I think that on this charge, he should have been found not guilty. I think the manslaughter charge was right. The unintentional second-degree charge was correct. But this charge here, this second-degree murder charge, I totally disagree with. I don't think that Derek Chauvin acted with a depraved mind or he had evil or ill intent towards George Floyd. I disagree with that charge. So basically what I'm saying is that he should have been found guilty on the 2 counts, not on the 3rd count. Okay. So if you want to call me, guys, you can do that if you want. Hold on. I'm doing a show. Should have done this earlier. Call me on that number if you'd like to sort of tell me what you think. Where's the phone? There it is. Tell me what you think. You know, these such comments here, they shock me when I read this. Bright Period says, sad topic, let it slide. What, we shouldn't be talking about this? It's a topic of note. That's the essence of being on the internet, is that you talk about these things. This always amazes me when people say, no, don't talk about it. It's crazy. Hello? Put my headphones on. Hey. Can you hear me? Hello? Hey. Oh my goodness. Hi there. Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? I'm quiet. Hello?
Bamwe 9 minutes umuntu napo kama pamukoshi wa muntu.
Oh my goodness.
Hello?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Hi there.
Hi, can you hear me? You need to listen to the call, not what's on your phone.
Oh my goodness. Hello?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Hello, Simon.
Yes, I can get you. Can you get me?
Yes, I can, Simon. I totally disagree with you when you come out and start saying he was struggling and he was resisting arrest. I think we also that video from the start to the end, even the pieces of footage that were cut out. And yes, they did put the handcuffs on them. We've seen other videos where people have been put in handcuffs and they are white and they're allowed to sit by the sidewalk and they're not treated as if they're there. But for me, what stands out the most is that this guy had his knee on his neck for 9 minutes, 9 whole minutes, in which this guy would have been subdued anyway. So for me, that is a depraved sense of duty. That is a depraved human being. Who does that, for heaven's sake?
Mm.
That's my contribution.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that.
Great.
Well, it's a viewpoint. I know it's a very controversial viewpoint, and I've always maintained that, again, one of the things that breaks my heart about American society is this notion that police officers are out to kill you. Yes, there are cases where that exists, but we're living in a new era now. And this isn't 1955. This isn't 1960, where you didn't have body cams and street cameras everywhere. Things have changed, and my advice has always been the same, regardless of who it is. If I had children, oh, here we go. Hello. This is an international call. Hello.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Mwewa.
A very good afternoon to you, sir. Where are you calling us from?
I'm calling you from the United Kingdom.
Wow, from England. How's Madge and her team?
Yeah, there's an echo on the line, yeah?
Oh, is there?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. My contribution. Hello?
Yep.
I'm getting you.
We can get you too.
Over George Floyd, the three charges, all the charges were correctly made and proven by the prosecution. The examples you are giving, the reasons or your views that you are giving are the views that the prosecution gave, and they failed, right? To start with, George Floyd was found in the car by the police, not by Mr. Sylvain, right? He was found in the car, and immediately the police got to the car, he put the hand on George Floyd. Get out of the fucking car. Get out of the fucking car. Pointing the gun. He never spoke to him. The first thing he did was to point the gun at George Floyd's head. Right? So, and when he got out, he was handcuffed. He was led to the shop. He was made to sit down. There was no resistance from the time he got from the car and he was handcuffed. Right? He was being asked the name, brought the police the name, not his name. There was no resistance from there. There was no resistance. The time the resistance we're talking about started was when he was told to sit in the car. He was apprehended. He was arrested. Okay? He was arrested. He was under control. But the guy was trying to explain to the cops, saying he had a position. He was scared of small rooms, small areas.
And
he couldn't sit in the car.
He was claustrophobic.
If the police who are well trained should have listened to that, and they know there are people with such conditions, they should have set him down. They should have sat him down. Hello?
I hear you, sir. I hear you. Is he still there? Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. Go ahead. Oh, the phone call dropped. Yes, again, I understand that. I do. And you know, these things, when you watch them from beginning to end, the biggest complaint I have is that, and I think people lose sight of this. And of course, the law looks at it, they look at it completely differently. My view has always been, if you don't resist, if you just from the beginning, just do what the officer says, you won't put yourself in harm's way. But when you resist, when you push back, oh man, you set into motion all kinds of stuff. And it's really sad. Well, hey guys, that's all I had time for. And thank you so much for, let me just turn this off so that we're on the same page. Thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon to be with me. And thank you for your contributions. God bless. Bye-bye.